They say we've seen every image from World War II, but we haven't. Buried in forgotten archives lie photographs too raw, too human, and too powerful for textbooks. These aren't the staged portraits of generals or the famous battle scenes you know, they're the unseen moments, fear, hope, and heartbreak, captured in real time as the world burned and rebuilt itself. If history still has the power to move you, stay with us. Because what you're about to see are 100 rare and haunting photos that will change how you see World War II, forever. Subscribe now to Antique Visions, where every image tells the truth time tried to forget. Benito Mussolini inspects the troops in Rome, 1934. The world watched as Mussolini paraded his army through Rome, promising to restore Italy's lost glory. Behind the cheers lay a regime built on fear and propaganda, foreshadowing the darkness to come. Hitler accepts the ovation of the Reichstag after announcing the Anschluss with Austria, March 1938. As the crowd erupted in adoration, Austria's independence vanished overnight. Few realized this triumph would be only the beginning of Hitler's relentless march across Europe. Hitler at a Nazi rally, October 17 to 18, 1931. The flames of fanaticism were already rising as Hitler's words stirred a broken nation. These rallies became the stage where hate was turned into policy, and applause drowned out warning. Japanese troops entering Tsitsiha, 1931. In the frozen north of China, Japanese soldiers advanced with cold precision. The invasion of Manchuria marked the first spark in what would soon become a global inferno. Woman crying as she hails Hitler, Germany, 1930s. Her tears told a story of devotion born from desperation. To millions like her, Hitler was not a tyrant yet, but a savior in a time of national humiliation. Citizens of Shanghai fleeing into the international settlement during the Battle of Shanghai, 1937. As bombs rained down, Shanghai's streets filled with smoke and panic. Civilians ran for safety, unaware that their suffering would soon echo across continents. Neville Chamberlain showing the Anglo-German Declaration, September 30, 1938. Smiling with the paper in hand, Chamberlain promised, "Peace for our time." Yet that fragile promise was already dying in the shadows of Europe. USS Ranger, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga at anchor off Honolulu, April 8, 1938. Far from Europe's turmoil, America's carriers lay calm in the Pacific sun. Within a few short years, those same ships would sail into war's fiery heart. Military parade on Red Square, Moscow, May 1, 1938. Beneath the banners of unity, Stalin's armies marched in perfect step. The Soviet Union prepared for a conflict it hoped to avoid but knew was inevitable. Evacuees arriving in Kingsbridge from Bristol, 1940. Children carried small bags and brave smiles as they left home behind. Britain's evacuation was an act of love and fear, a nation trying to protect its future. Japanese soldier with flags, December 1937. With a rising sun fluttering at his side, this soldier marched under the illusion of empire and destiny. In his wake, the Nanjing massacre would soon unfold. Mussolini and fascist black-shirt youth, 1935. Italy's young were taught to salute, not to question. Mussolini's dream of a Roman revival turned schools into factories of obedience. Pearl Harbor under attack, USS West Virginia aflame, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning was shattered by fire and chaos. The Pacific slept no more, America had been pulled into the world's greatest war. Blitzed bus, Harrington Square, London, September 9, 1940. A London bus lies mangled in the street, its route forever ended by falling fire. The Blitz turned ordinary nights into infernos, and made heroes of those who simply endured. Rotterdam, St. Lawrencekerk and the ruined city after the May 1940 bombing. Once a city of light and trade, Rotterdam became a graveyard of smoke and silence. In a single morning, centuries of history turned to ash beneath the roar of German bombers. Refugees and soldiers, Warsaw, 1939, Julian Bryan. Families fled through shattered streets as soldiers fought and fell around them. In their eyes lived the terror of a city abandoned by the world. German troops in Russia, 1941. Endless columns of men and machines rolled eastward into the mist. They believed victory was certain, but ahead lay a frozen hell that would consume them all. The evacuation from Dunkirk, May-June 1940. On the beaches of Dunkirk, trapped soldiers waited beneath a sky filled with death. And yet, against all odds, small boats from across the channel came, turning defeat into deliverance. Dunkirk and the retreat from France, 1940. The French coast was littered with abandoned helmets and broken hopes. But even in retreat, the spirit of resistance refused to drown. Broadgate, Coventry, bomb damage after the Coventry Blitz. The heart of Coventry lay in ruins, its cathedral still burning beneath a crimson sky. In that silence, a new word was born, Covent-rated, the language of total war. Aircraft spotter on a London rooftop, 1940. With nothing but binoculars and courage, he scanned the heavens for death. Alone in the dark, his warning could mean the difference between survival and ruin. Coventry city centre devastated after Luftwaffe raid. The city's heart was reduced to rubble, yet its people stood unbroken. Amid smoke and tears, they whispered a vow, that Britain would never bow. London Underground used as an air raid shelter, Aldwych Station, 1940. Deep beneath the trembling city, families huddled together as bombs thundered above. In the flicker of candlelight, laughter and lullabies defied the darkness. Evacuees from London in Pembrokeshire, Wales, 1940. Far from the sirens, children learned to smile again, though every goodnight carried the ache of separation. For some, home would never be the same again. Rotterdam burning after the May 1940 bombardment. The city burned like a living thing, its reflection dancing on the Maas River. Rotterdam's destruction sent a message to the world, surrender, or share its fate. British children leaving under the evacuation scheme, September 1, 1939. Small hands waved from train windows, clutching tags that bore their names. Behind every tearful farewell stood a parent's silent prayer, that they would one day be reunited. Jewish men escorted to forced labor, Warsaw, March 1940. They marched in silence through streets they once called home. Stripped of dignity and hope, their only crime was existing in a world that had forgotten its humanity. Sugar rationing, World War II. A handful of sugar became a treasure, a symbol of survival in a world at war. Even the smallest pleasures were measured by coupons and courage. French resistance fighters at Hôtel de Ville, Paris uprising, August 1944. With rifles in trembling hands, they rose from the shadows to reclaim their city. Each shot fired was a declaration, that France's heart had never surrendered. Resistance inspects Natzweiler Crematorium, 1944. They entered in silence, faced with the ashes of truth. The air still carried the stench of horror, proof of what humanity could do when it forgot to feel. Dutch children and German soldiers, Amsterdam, May 6, 1941. Children played under the watchful eyes of occupiers. Their laughter echoed strangely in a city that no longer belonged to them. French forces of the interior fighter with a Bren gun at Châteaudun. Two boys watched as a man stood ready to fight tyranny. In his stance, they saw not just rebellion, but the fragile hope of freedom reborn. French resistance and paratroopers, Normandy, 1944. In the fields of Normandy, strangers became brothers in arms. Together they wove the first threads of liberation through the torn fabric of war. Barbed wire marking the Warsaw Ghetto boundary, 1941. The wire didn't just divide streets, it divided lives. Behind it, thousands dreamed of freedom they would never see. Stroop Report photo, Warsaw Ghetto, April, May 1943. A boy with raised hands faced a soldier's gun, an image that haunts history itself. The ghetto burned, but the courage of its people would outlive the flames. The Faux Soir underground newspaper, Belgium, November 1943. Printed in secret, read in whispers, it mocked the occupiers with laughter and truth. For those few pages, Belgium was free again. Wireless operators aboard HMS Bulolo, Royal Navy, World War II. In cramped rooms filled with static and tension, they carried the unseen lifeline of war. Each signal they sent was a heartbeat of hope across oceans. Schoolboy using War Ration Book 2, 1943. He clutched his ration book like a badge of duty, proud to serve in his own small way. Even children learned that war demanded sacrifice, and patience far beyond their years. Corporal Charles H. Johnson waves on a Red Ball Express convoy, France, September 5, 1944. Through endless mud and danger, these drivers kept the lifeline of war alive. The Red Ball Express roared through chaos, proof that courage could be driven on four wheels. U.S. Army men and equipment crossing the Remagen Bridge, 1945. For a moment, history hung over the Rhine. Against impossible odds, the Allies seized the bridge, and with it, the final path into Hitler's heartland. Allied advance at the Siegfried Line, 1945. Steel met steel as men clawed through bunkers and barbed wire. Each shattered wall marked the slow death of the Third Reich's last defense. American forces landing at Rendova Island, June 30, 1943. Through crashing surf and whistling bullets, the first wave hit the shore. For these men, every beach was a question: would they see tomorrow's dawn? Anti-tank infantrymen dash past a blazing German fuel trailer, Kronach, Germany, 1945. The air burned with the smell of war as flames licked the sky. They ran not just toward victory, but through the dying breaths of an empire. Infantrymen of the 255th Regiment moved down a street in Waldenburg, 1945. The city smoldered with defeat, its silence broken by cautious footsteps. Each doorway held the echo of a vanished world. Soldiers of the 55th Armored Infantry Battalion moved through smoke-filled Wernburg, 1945. Shadows emerged from the haze, weary, unrecognizable men who had seen too much. They weren't chasing glory anymore, only an end. East meets West, sign, April 25, 1945. On that day, American and Soviet soldiers shook hands at the elbow. For a fleeting moment, the world believed peace had a face. Chow served to American infantrymen on their way to La Roche, Belgium, January 13, 1945. Amid frozen forests and distant gunfire, they huddled for warmth and a taste of home. A tin of food became a feast, a reminder of what they were fighting to return to. Canadian infantry moving through Holten to Ridgen, Netherlands, April 9, 1945. Their boots pressed freedom back into Dutch soil. With every step, liberation replaced the silence of occupation. Chinese convoy on the 21 Curves Road, March 26, 1945. Trucks wound like ants along a road carved into the mountains. Every turn was a battle against gravity, exhaustion, and fate itself. Paratroops landing in Holland during Allied operations, September 1944. Like raindrops of steel, they fell from the clouds into a storm of gunfire. Some would never rise again, but their courage lit the path to victory. U.S. anti-tank crew fires on Nazis in Holland. Surrounded and outgunned, they refused to yield. Each blast from their cannon was a heartbeat of defiance echoing through occupied Europe. The landing at Empress Augusta Bay, Bougainville, 1943. As dawn broke, Marines stormed ashore through smoke and chaos. Every wave that crashed against the beach carried men who knew this might be their last sunrise. A water buffalo loaded with Marines bound for Tinian Island, July 1944. They rowed across the open sea, faces hardened by salt and fear. Ahead lay Tinian, a name soon to be etched in fire and history. Soldiers of the 165th Infantry struggle ashore on Butaritari Island, 1943. The ocean turned red as bullets churned the surf, yet they pressed forward, driven by duty stronger than terror itself. Army reinforcements crossing coral reefs toward Saipan, July 1944. The shallow water offered no shelter, only death and determination. Each step on the reef brought them closer to the island and further from home. Marines hit rough water, leaving their LST for Cape Gloucester, December 26, 1943. Their landing craft pitched and rolled under enemy fire. Christmas came with gunfire instead of carols, and courage became the only gift exchanged. American troops of the 163rd Infantry hit the beach at Wadka Island, May 18, 1944. They leapt from the Higgins boats into a storm of lead. For many, the Pacific was not a place, it was a nightmare that never ended. Landing operations on Rendova Island, June 30, 1943. The jungle loomed thick and merciless, hiding both the enemy and disease. Each inch gained cost sweat, blood, and brothers. The first flag on Guam, July 20, 1944. Tattered but proud, the stars and stripes rose over Guam once more. For those who raised it, that cloth meant redemption, and a promise kept. Marines stormed Tarawa, November 1943. In just 76 hours, Tarawa became an island of ghosts. The price of victory was so steep that even the sea seemed to mourn. Flamethrowers at Kwajalein, February 4, 1944. Flames roared through bunkers, erasing everything in their path. It was victory through fire, and a haunting glimpse of what total war truly meant. Iwo Jima, Red Beach, February 19, 1945. The sand swallowed men whole as gunfire tore the sky. Every yard of that volcanic island was bought with lives too young to lose. Landing vehicles on Iwo Jima Beach, 1945. Smoke and screams filled the air as wave after wave hit the shore. Iwo Jima became not a place, but a wound in the soul of a generation. Okinawa Sniper Hunt, May 1945. Amid rain and ruin, 2 Marines crept through shattered earth. Okinawa would be the bloodiest of all, a preview of what an invasion of Japan might bring. "We can do it" poster. She wasn't just a poster, she was a promise. Rosie the Riveter became the face of determination, reminding millions that victory began in the hands of those who stayed behind. Women in vocational schools, April 1942. With husbands and brothers at the front, women learned to weld, forge, and build. Their classrooms became the new battlefields of endurance and change. Women at Douglas Aircraft, October 1942. Grease-stained and proud, they stood where men once worked. Each rivet they drove into metal brought the Allies one heartbeat closer to triumph. Riveter at Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, Burbank, 1940 to 1945. Her hands crafted wings that would carry soldiers to war, and sometimes, never home again. She built not just planes, but history itself. Marine with machine gun and cigarette, September 14, 1944. His eyes tell a story words can't, of exhaustion, fear, and fierce will. Between battles, a single cigarette was a reminder he was still alive. Sailors bunk aboard Fleet Submarine, 1943. Cramped in steel silence beneath the waves, they slept beside the sound of depth charges. Dreams came rare, but courage was constant. Navy pilots playing basketball aboard USS Monterey, June 1944. Laughter echoed across the carrier deck as warplanes rested below. For a brief moment, these warriors remembered what peace felt like. Bing Crosby performing in London, 1944. His voice drifted through bombed-out streets like a memory of home. Music became medicine, softening the hard edges of war. Danny Kaye entertains Marines, October 25, 1945. Dust, laughter, and applause, a strange mix of joy in the middle of ruin. For those few minutes, the war faded behind the sound of comedy. Mickey Rooney performing, April 13, 1945. He sang to men who might not live to see another dawn. In his smile, they found a spark of the world they were fighting to save. Marlene Dietrich signing a cast, November 24, 1944. A star bent down to comfort the wounded, proving that compassion could shine even in the darkest trenches of war. A soldier lifts his wife as his child looks on, Christmas 1944. Love defied the distance between the battlefront and homefront. In that embrace, the war momentarily lost its power. Navy chaplain holds Mass at Saipan, June 1944. Amid wreckage and graves, faith still found a voice. The chaplain's whispered prayers rose higher judgment. Nuremberg Trials, Defendant's Dock, 1945–1946. Here sat the architects of tyranny, surrounded not by armies, but by justice. For the first time in history, the world declared that even leaders were not above the law. German General Dossler's execution, December 1, 1945. He stood rigid as the sentence was carried out, a symbol of accountability written in gunfire. His fate marked the end of the illusion that duty could excuse cruelty. Field Marshal Keitel signs German surrender, May 8, 1945. A trembling hand signed away 1,000 years of delusion. The Third Reich ended not with fanfare, but with ink and silence. Celebration at Piccadilly Circus, London, May 7, 1945. As church bells rang, strangers embraced like family. After 6 years of fear, the night sky once again belonged to fireworks, not firebombs. President Truman announces Japan's surrender, August 14, 1945. Behind his steady voice was the weight of millions of lives lost. Peace had returned, but it came draped in mourning. Times Square kiss, August 14, 1945. In a single photograph, the world exhaled. It wasn't romance alone, it was relief, exhaustion, and the desperate joy of survival. General MacArthur signs aboard USS Missouri, September 2, 1945. Pens replaced guns as the ink sealed Japan's surrender. Around him stood men who had seen too much, bearing witness to history's turning page. Japanese POWs bowing, August 15, 1945. Heads bent low, not just in defeat, but in recognition of the suffering their war had caused. In that bow lay both shame, and the hope of renewal. Jewish children departing for Palestine, June 5, 1945. Orphans of the Holocaust boarded trains toward an uncertain promise. Their smiles were small, but they carried the spark of a future no one could extinguish. Coast Guard Cemetery, 1945. Rows of white markers stretched into eternity, silent as the sea beside them. Each name carved in stone was a story unfinished, yet remembered forever. The guns fell silent, but the ghosts remained, etched forever in these forgotten photographs. History doesn't end when the war does, it waits for those willing to remember. Subscribe to Antique Visions, and keep the past alive, one image at a time.